Now let's blow this one up for you a little bit. This is another research study just published in February actually of this year. Okay, you can see it's a review of studies. So I like reviews. I like reading research reviews because generally what happens, these doctors pull together hundreds of different research studies, in some cases thousands, and they look at all of the data, they pull it all together, and then they make sense of it. And then they draw some different inferences and conclusions. But in this review, so again, this is a study of studies. You can see the title is Nutrient Deficiencies in Adults and Children with Treated and Untreated Celiac Disease. Okay, and so what they found in this study was whether the person was just being diagnosed with celiac disease. That's untreated, right? Untreated means you haven't gone on a gluten-free diet yet. They found wide-scale nutritional deficiencies in untreated celiac and gluten-sensitive individuals, but they also found widespread nutritional deficiencies in people who had gone on gluten-free diets. Now, if you've read No Grain, No Pain, you probably already know what I'm about to say, which is most people, when they go on a gluten-free diet, they do it wrong. They eat all the junk food and all the processed food. They eat all the food that has zero nutritional value, and so they never correct nutritional deficiencies, and they just end up kind of collecting them because they're eating poorly. This study found that to be the case. They found that people, whether they were treated or whether they were on a gluten-free diet or not on a gluten-free diet, they had a lot of nutritional deficiencies. And the key thing, and the reason why I feel like this is the number one important thing I could teach you, is because when you're coming into a gluten-free diet, the likelihood that you have nutritional deficiency is extremely high. Now, when we take and we look at each individual nutrient, when I talk about a nutrient, what I'm referring to are what are called essential nutrients. What is essential nutrients? What are we referring to? What does that mean? Essential nutrients are what it infers, right? Essential means the body cannot sustain health and life and function without these nutrients. These are things like your vitamins, your minerals, your amino acids. They're essential, meaning you have to eat them. Your body cannot synthesize them. You have to eat them, right? So things like your vitamins, your B vitamins, your fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin C, things like magnesium and calcium and zinc and chromium and selenium and copper and vanadium, etc. So these are essential nutrients. And so when the body lacks essential nutrients, then functions start to break down. Wherever that nutrient is necessary to perform a function for your body, okay, as in the case, for example, of magnesium. Magnesium plays a role in converting carbohydrates into energy. Well, if you're magnesium deficient, your body becomes less efficient at being able to generate energy from the food that you eat. So you become what? Tired, fatigued, brain fogged, energy deficit, all because of that one mineral deficiency. Now, what we're saying here again is that people that have gluten sensitivity issues, the vast majority of them have at least one deficiency. Okay, and more than half of them have at least two deficiencies. Now, here's what this research study shows. These are some of the top nutritional deficiencies found in people with gluten sensitivity issues. Vitamin B12, iron, folate, zinc, vitamin D, calcium. My experience, I'll share that with you. Let's drop this down. I want to show you what my experience is. My experience is this. If we put it in order from greatest to least, number one is vitamin D. Okay. Number two, vitamin B12. Okay. Number three is iron deficiency. Number four is zinc. This is just, again, my experience in running thousands of these nutritional tests and thousands of people over the past 20 years. And then we really could put a number 5 in here, and that's, in my experience, is omega-3 fatty acids. These are 5 of the most common nutritional deficiencies that we see. Now, what these authors did is they discussed, within the confines of these deficiencies, they discussed the secondary diseases that can be caused or contributed to by these deficiencies. So, for example, zinc deficiency in an adult can cause anorexia. You need zinc to produce digestive enzymes. You need zinc to seal the gut. So zinc deficiency contributes to leaky gut, among other health issues. And children, it can lead to failure to grow or thrive. So if you're a parent, you've got kids at home, you suspect gluten sensitivity, they're not growing or they're under the curve, this is what we're referring to, right? If you've got children that aren't growing. Now, failure to thrive in babies is a much more serious situation, but failure to hit those growth curves, oftentimes that can be a zinc deficiency. And so what doctors oftentimes will do with kids is they'll put them on hormones, growth hormones, to help them meet that growth. They never look at zinc. I shouldn't say never. They very rarely look at zinc as a potential reason. If we look at vitamin B12 deficiency, again, super common. In my experience, the second most common deficiency found in gluten-sensitive individuals, neurological disease. Well, what does neurological disease mean? This is kind of a broad category or broad spectrum of different conditions. Neurological disease could be things like neuropathy, numbness or tingling in the hands or feet. It could be kind of a radiating pain. There's a type of neuropathy that commonly gets misdiagnosed called carpal tunnel syndrome, which is, again, another different type of neuropathy. There are other forms of neuropathy that don't manifest as physical manifestation symptoms. So not like numbness, tingling, or burning of the extremities, but neuropathy in the brain, which is, depression, which is inflammation of the brain. Schizophrenia is a disease that's been linked to gluten sensitivity, and we know B12 plays a role. Demyelinating diseases like multiple sclerosis, right, where people start to lose their ability, their strength, right, and their ability to control their muscles very well. These are neurological diseases, right? And vitamin B12 deficiency we know can cause that. There's also movement disorders that are neurological, like gluten-induced ataxia or vertigo, where you become really, really dizzy. That's neurological as well. So these are all some of the hallmark manifestations of how vitamin B12 deficiency can show up as a symptom. Now, it's important to understand that, because if gluten is causing the deficiency and you go on a gluten-free diet, okay, going on a gluten-free diet doesn't necessarily correct the vitamin B12 deficiency. Going on a gluten-free diet, depending on how you're following the diet, stops the damage, okay? It stops the potential for malabsorption and nutritional deficiency, but it doesn't correct the existing nutritional deficiencies. Just a change in diet is not always enough to correct that deficiency. So what happens to that person who goes on a gluten-free diet, right, but they're still struggling with nerve symptoms or neurological problems, and then they get frustrated because they're on that gluten-free diet and they think, oh, this gluten-free diet's not working, and then they quit the diet. But the diet's what caused the B12 deficiency, but the B12 deficiency is what caused the neurological problems. And so going on a gluten-free diet might not correct the neurological problems, but if the person doesn't know they have the B12 deficiency, then they never really get an answer. And this is my point. This is why this is so important, is because gluten induces nutritional deficiency. The nutritional deficiency can cause a plethora of different symptoms, syndromes, diseases that oftentimes get misdiagnosed, right? You go to a neurologist if you have a neurological disorder, and 99% of the time, depending on the neurologist that you visit, most of them aren't going to measure your nutrition. They're going to put you on some type of medicine that appeases the symptoms of the neuropathy, or some type of medicine that slows down the immune system's aggression if it's an autoimmune issue, but they're not going to assess or address the origin of the potential problem, which very much might be a nutritional issue. You can see a lot of examples here on this chart. Hyperparathyroidism is another one. Vitamin D and calcium deficiency can contribute to hyperparathyroidism. Neoplasia, what is that? Neoplasia means new growth. This is actually kind of pre-cancer, if you will. We know, for example, zinc and folate deficiency can reduce your body's ability to control cancer cells. And so this is why they're linked to neoplasia. Impaired sexual maturation. We know that zinc is necessary for children to develop secondary sexual characteristics. In other words, little boys turn into young men, little girls turn into young women, and zinc is what plays a major role in that. We know that folate and vitamin D and calcium play a role in bone growth, in bone healing, and bone structure. So osteoporosis, very common sequelae or side effect of a person who's been being damaged by gluten for years and years and years. And then over here on this other side, again, anemia. I mentioned this earlier, but iron deficiency anemia, vitamin B12 deficiency anemia, folate deficiency causes anemia, zinc deficiency can cause anemia. So it's not just really even these two nutrients. And then there's this other scenario here, which is hyperhomocystinemia, which homocysteine is one of the lab tests. We'll talk about that in a minute. I've mentioned that before if you've paid attention on my show, that the chemical homocysteine is an independent risk factor for cancer, heart disease, diabetes, and bone loss, and also nerve damage. So we never want to see this chemical being elevated. And again, this chemical is elevated. It's very commonly elevated in people with gluten sensitivity. Why? Because the gluten caused nutritional deficiencies. The nutritional deficiencies caused the elevation in homocysteine. So again, we have to think about the target that we're trying to hit. If we're identifying gluten as a problem in the diet and we remove the gluten, it doesn't mean that the nutritional deficiencies that the gluten caused are automatically, magically going to disappear. It means that you need to have it evaluated. You need to have your doctor, demand from your doctor a nutritional status evaluation, because at the end of the day, this is a scenario that you don't want to get into. Hey, don't forget to check out the rest of the series right here. Make sure you hit subscribe below. And as always, thanks for tuning in.